Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. I'm Sarah Vantine here with the future of automotive retail. We are going to talk today about radical change in the automotive industry. I have some special guests with us today. We've got Steve Greenfield, Ed Roberts, Stephen Wessner, Brian Kramer, Tully Williams, and Dave Foy. Thank you, gentlemen, everybody, for being here today.
Great to be here.
Yes, Sarah.
Good to be here.
Steve, I want to kick it to you first. So, one of the things that we've been talking about at a recent panel, we had asked, what radical change meant. And Ed Roberts had talked about how it was shifting the mindset from how I've always done it that way, with the mindset of let me start by asking this question. So, from your perspective, you have a lot of things going on. You have your pulse on a lot of information in automotive. How will radical change affect dealership management teams to stay competitive and relevant in today's marketplace?
Yeah, well, first, Sarah, thanks for having me today. It's really great to be here. I'd say that the franchise dealer model has proven to be very defensible, right? But having said that, we are having in this era of accelerating change, and I think whether you look at EVs and EV adoption and all the implications of EVs, whether you look at vehicle connectivity and over-the-air updates and the implications that's going to have on both service as well as unbundling features and offering them on a monthly subscription basis, there's a lot of change coming, and I think the recurring thing is making sure that all of our employees are ready to adapt to all of this change. The franchise dealer model has proven that the employees are adaptable, but we have this challenge in the industry with high turnover. I think it's going to become more important than ever to ensure that all of our employees across the executive level, all the way down to the frontline employees, are all prepared for and knowledgeable about what changes are potentially coming, and then being prepared for those changes and not being caught flat-footed as these changes accelerate.
Well, Dave and Stephen, I want to ask you all this question. So and Brian Kramer, I'd love to ask you this as well. What do you all, and Dave, I'll kick it to you first. What do you think is going to cause the most disruption in 2024 as we start this year? What do you see happening in the auto industry?
That's a big question. I'll give you a shorter answer. I think probably the biggest disruption is going to be more people going outside the industry to find talent, to bring that talent into the dealerships. Leadership development going to become non-negotiable in 2024. We are not going to solve the retention issue. The generations that are coming through now are not a generation or generations that are looking to work somewhere for 20, 30 years. And we need to stop expecting that. College football programs lose a third of their people every single year and somehow perform at a high level. We need to do the same thing, and we get there by leadership development. We've got to have good leaders, to Steve's point, that can see change, adapt to change, and help their teams be prepared and adapt to change.
Well, Stephen, what do you see as the biggest disruption into 2024?
So I think from my perspective, it's going to be margin compression. I think that we've started to see dealer margins start to drift down. I think we're going to see a pretty big whipsaw over the course of this year, the remaining 11 months, because we're going to see sort of first we're going to feel it on new vehicles overall, but specifically on EVs. But I think the competition is starting to mount, and it's going to start. We'll exit 2024 looking a lot more like pre-COVID times in terms of dealership margins overall, et cetera. We're going to see it continue to drift down. And for those dealers that aren't ready for this, you've got 11 months now left in the year to prepare for this. But I think that it isn't going to be a shock to the system, but some dealers aren't going to be prepared for operating their businesses very efficiently. They've gotten used to these higher margins, and I think that's going to be the biggest disruption, I think, over the remainder of this year.
Brian, you see a lot in the technology pieces, and so from your perspective, what do you think is going to be the biggest disruptor to 2024?
I think that most of the dealers that I interact with, or I'm assuming it's the same case across the board, are not managing their online virtual process. And I'm not talking about the appointments and stuff through the BDC. I'm talking about what happens prior to knowing about the customer, when the unique identifier to be able to do retargeting and marketing. And the most shrewd operators that I come across, have this down. They operate their business like a data scientist would from a marketing standpoint, and they're connecting the dots as to where the breakdowns are. If they're not finishing their mobile site to schedule a service appointment, then they're only looking at the desktop site, and they're not looking at it through the customer's lens. I think that that's one of the primary things, but I also think that the technology for marketing is going to enable people like that. But it's also like, our appraisal tool that we have takes people that really are working at Starbucks or working hospitality that are just nice, people that are talking to people. It doesn't require the same skill set as what it used to with a lot of tribal knowledge. So it's enabling people that never before could appraise cars or do service write-up. You see it right now with multiple service drive tools where valets can go around and do half the MPI, whereas that didn't used to be the case a few years ago. Now you're getting a different skill set, which ties back into what Dave Foy was saying. So now it's going to expose anybody when all these tasks are automated and you get rid of all the redundant things that used to be you needed tribal knowledge for. Now you're going to be exposed. So anybody who doesn't know how to develop leaders, to recruit them, develop them, promote them, and repeat that cycle, they're going to be seriously exposed because it's just going to come down to leadership development. I agree with Dave.
So Ed and Tully, we've talked a lot about the technology, but what is your perspective? And I'll start with Ed first. How does all of this change impact the customer experience?
Well, the unfortunate part is we don't necessarily look at it from the customer experience first. So when I heard the other guys talking, the thing that I would add to that would be the lack of a plan. That's usually the biggest disruptors. We don't have a plan on how we're going to react to anything. So everything becomes a reaction. And that's how we take care of our customers too, as a rule, is we react to whatever the situation is rather than have a process and looking at it from their lens and coming in backwards. So our opportunity is to relook at everything we do and don't look at it from what's convenient for us. Look at it as how does it turn out in the end? And when we work at it that way, it becomes easier for us because we didn't realize how simple it is to begin with and what our true expectations are. And then how over the top we can take that.
Tully, your perspective?
I love this. I love it when we talk about humans, and I think that Dave started this conversation, and Ed put the topping on top. Is that it's all about our great people at our dealership doing their job right. And I think too is that we have to encourage to get people to join the automotive group. I don't see if there's any other industry in the world that you can be uneducated and make an obscene amount of money every month. And this is the industry to be in. But here's one thing you have to be. You have to be a good people person. Right? And training is the huge deal. And I think what Ed said is spot on, is that do you have processes in your stores that you actually abide by? There's processes that we pretend to do, and there's processes that we actually do. And I believe data is the king of that, is that every employee at the Neal company knows how they do on a daily basis. And we talk about that. And do we do evaluations on that? The process that works at your store are your great team members doing that process? And how do we encourage great people to come and join and do that process? And I'm telling you, it's an everyday occurrence and you have to be on it every day. So Dave and Ed, spot on. It's all about great team members.
Well, and Stefan, so when we were talking about the adaptation to the customer experience, one of the things that always pops into my mind is, okay, well, the dealership at the end of the day is also focusing on the revenue piece, right? You have to have the doors open. You have to keep the lights on. That's a factor in the customer and the employee experience. So what new revenue streams do you see dealerships being able to implement to be more successful in this new environment?
Well, I think, when you look at it, there are a range of revenue streams that, depending on what dealership you're looking at, that they're not already taking advantage of. I mean, whether it's tires or whether it's different kind of programs. And over the years, industries have been created on the things that dealers are not doing. And I think in a lot of cases, they need to start to look more seriously at those things. And then when you start to expand from there, and the technology that the other guys have talked about plays into this idea, I think there's going to be an increasing request for, call it mobility as a service. In other words, people can't afford a car. They can't afford those kind of things, but they need mobility. They need transportation. So finding a way to provide them with transportation whether it's, different kinds of vehicles available through a subscription, or whether it's an e-bike, or whether it's some other form of transportation. But I think dealers are going to have to take a much more holistic view of mobility and transportation than they have in the past. It's more than just buying and selling cars. It's got to be a more holistic view. And I think the guys are right. The team and the challenge that they're facing, I think they're up to it. But it is going to take some work, and they have to reframe that. It's not a transactional thought process. It has to be a different thought process than a purely transactional one, because that's what customers are looking for.
I think you also need to put a restaurant in between a Ford and a Lincoln store. And I don't think enough dealers are thinking about that in terms of revenue.
That'd be
Yes,
genius.
yes, I agree. Ed's place is awesome. I've been there.
We are here at the Fixed Ops Roundtable. We have the Radical Change panel going on now. For those of us that have just tuned in, we're talking a little bit about dealership revenue streams right now. And Steve and Brian, I'd love to get your take on this as well. So we talked a lot about AI today. We've talked a lot about technology. What can dealerships look at with leveraging this new technology? How do they improve their revenue?
Yeah, I'll jump in first, Brian, if you don't mind. I mean, I think that you could be very scared and intimidated by this next wave of vehicles and how much technology and how sophisticated they are, right? It can be daunting for the salesperson, definitely daunting for the person who's trying to service those vehicles, et cetera. Or you could flip it and you could say, this is a great opportunity. Like, for example, these cars are going to have a lot of sensors, cameras, radar, LiDAR that are going to need to be calibrated. And who's going to calibrate those things if not the franchise dealer? So having the consumer come back periodically to have those things, calibrated means another opportunity for the consumer to come back in, get some consumer pay work done, also take a look at the vehicle and see if there's anything else to be done. I think that over-the-air updates can be great. They could be scary because the consumer may very well get these updates done at home over their Wi-Fi connection, or you might ask the consumer to come in every year or every 6 months to ensure that the car is fully updated. We've got you all the updates that you need to make sure your software is entirely up and your car is as safe as it can be. And the last thing I'll say is, we will see automakers continue to experiment with unbundling features. You may activate those features at the time of purchase or 6 months later. And for the dealer that isn't prepared to have those conversations with consumers, it could be very scary and daunting. The flip side is, I think these are going to be new revenue opportunities for a dealer to get high margin revenue. That if you're up to date on what features a vehicle has, and you're able to convince the consumer to subscribe to these features, that's all new recurring revenue. That a lot of that will come to the dealer. So I think not to be scared by the new technology on vehicles, but you're going to have to be very open-minded and be a student and learn about what these new technologies mean. I think all of that may flow into new revenue centers for dealers.
Well, it's hard to top that. I'll say the two lowest hanging fruit that I see, in addition to remote service, which, obviously we talked about that ad nauseum, and Ed's a better subject matter expert for that than I am. But I would say rental car businesses, everybody's going to need to fuel their used car operations. And right now it's something that dealers kind of toe dipped in before, but I think that it's going to be a critical element to really figure out that life cycle between what are your rental cars, your loaner cars, depending on what your franchise is. How does that life cycle go? What's the ordering cadence? When do you put those in for maximum profitability? When do you pull them out for maximum profitability? And having people dedicated to that to constantly have aligned with your marketing campaigns and CPO and everything like that. I would say that the other thing is having in-home EV chargers. I got an EV on order. I don't know how I'm going to charge it or what I'm going to do, or there's not really a lot of resources in terms of how that works. But I see that as somebody selling a maintenance agreement on an in-home, like you would an air conditioning unit, and hooking up with local HVAC or electricians to, figure out how to do that. And there's, I'm sure, Steve, you're already going down that road. But the one thing that I'll kind of pin the tail on the donkey on this is there's many people that have technology. And I think that this is probably the most important thing. And I see it all the time. People can have the most technology in the world, but the people that are able to connect the dots and the true digital transformation and get people to actually use it and be able to harness it to make it more convenient. If you focus on convenience, people aren't shopping Uber Eats versus DoorDash and saying, oh, who's got the lower price? Like everybody thinks that they are with oil changes or brakes. When you sell convenience, Ed Roberts gave me the best service experience I've ever had. And I'm actually, I'm probably waiting for my next oil change to drive 6 hours up there, because I'd like to just knock it out while I'm up there, because he got me in and out in 22 minutes, even though I didn't need it. But it was just like a well-oiled machine. And I think that if everybody was focused on that instead of what's the person down the street doing, we'd all be a lot better off.
Well, and I would love that, Brian. And I want to pivot for a second into thinking about the future of our employees in this changing retail automotive space. So, the employee today in dealerships is radically different than it was, 10, 15 years ago. The quality of the individual in terms of how they operate this technology, how they understand it, all of that is shifting as our customer is shifting. So Dave Foy, I'd love to go to you first, and then Ed and Tully to get your opinions on this. But we're in a lot of competition in the automotive industry with top talent. So how do dealers better equip themselves to attract and retain top talent in 2024?
Yeah. So again, not to sound like a broken record, but it's leadership. Leadership is the way for us to be able to even start to entertain the conversation of attracting top talent, never mind retaining it. Right. We have tried for years in the dealership space to bring people in and keep them there. Right. But we have never worked on making sure that our leaders have the skills that they need to take care of that team. Right. We take an advisor and we promote them up to be a manager because they were really good at being an advisor, but we never give them the skills that they need to actually manage and lead a team. Right. There is a lot that goes into. I consider myself very, very lucky. I had mentors along the way that, as I moved up, helped me with those skills that I needed to be able to actually run a store. There's a lot of things you need to look at every single day on top of taking care of the team, right? There's a lot of moving parts. These are high dollar businesses that you're asking somebody to run, and you've given them zero training to do that. So I really believe everything is going to rise and fall on the dealerships that actually invest in their training and leadership teams. Now, you've still got to train the talent that comes in, right? You still can't do the stand by me method of come in and let the person stand next to somebody for a week and learn their job. You've still got to have an effective onboarding program, but the leader has to know how to actually make that work with the team.
Ed, what are some of the pieces that you're doing in your organization?
Well, it's going to what Dave said with training. It's training across the board. It's giving people opportunities to not just have a skill as a technician or as a salesperson, but give them the opportunity to be able to learn another skill, to be flexible within the store. And one of the things that's really prevented that over the years is we have a fear of growing our own replacement. So I just got to keep them locked in here. Well, as soon as you do, someone else is going to take them from you. So you got to lose the fear of training your replacement, continue to train yourself, continue to for your personal and professional growth, but then also provide those paths for your team members as well. Now, sometimes we got to pull them back in because they'll start on the job. Okay, well, this isn't so fun. Let me start something else. And we got to hold them back and give them some guidance, but it's giving them the opportunity to put themselves in different roles than what they started with.
Tully?
Ed's spot on. I think that, this is a great industry that we have challenges and we have opportunity for everybody, from a warranty admin to a porter, to a salesperson, to a detailer. But I think people want a pathway. And, and Ed and I do this very well, where we have great longevity. We don't have a personnel problem. I should knock on wood because I'm going to jinx myself, because we treat people with respect. And two is that we give them a pathway to success. Every porter wants to become a technician or service manager. We have it in writing how they can get there, and we treat them with respect. That is the issue. Is a salesperson starts as a lot junkie, right? Becomes a great salesperson. There's a pathway to become a sales manager, if not a general manager. Do we have assistant managers? Every service manager has an assistant. Train your replacement. Ed said it spot on. Every parts manager has an assistant. Train your replacement, right? Every technician has groups, and we give raises throughout the year based on training, right? Our goal is to encourage training. And I think Brian brought it up about training for EVs. Porsche does the best. Porsche sends the service advisor away for a week to learn about the car. And you think about that, who is the customer actually going to ask when there's a problem with the car, or what should I do? It's not the salesperson. It's their service advisor. You know, and I think
that's 100% right.
You know, what did they say about, you know, what product should I buy if it's on a prescription or not, right? I think that was awesome. They're not going to ask the salesperson. They're going to ask their service advisor. So OEMs need to train service advisors about the car. They should actually train them to be car salesmen, because what do we sell? They sell between 8 and 12 customers a day at our dealership, right? We sell every day, and customers trust us. And when they trust us, what do? They buy their next car, and they tell their friends and families to come back. So I encourage training, have pathways, encourage managers to grow your next replacement in our group. Our GMs in our stores, all of them are under 40. We want people to grow and grow and grow. We're not going to hire people because I love that, you know, he's the best service advisor, so he must become the next service manager. That is not the case. Have pathways, make people successful, and I'm telling you, it means so much when you're in a person that has grown great technicians to have life-changing events. It's the best thing you can ever do for yourself.
In our last few moments here, I want to ask everybody a lightning round question, and this is, just would like to get maybe a minute or less answer. And I know this is going to be a tough one to encapsulate, but there's been a lot of announcements and changes in the industry. Of course, you know, a lot of dealers are talking about this Amazon and Hyundai partnership. And it's become evident that the digital marketing efforts are going to shift as a result of that union. So just going around, Steve, I'll start with you first, then Ed, then Stefan, Brian, and Tully, and Dave Foy will finish us off. But lightning round, how can dealerships enhance their current digital marketing strategy? What's one takeaway that they could do today to help their customers?
Yeah, so I think that, as you said, Sarah, I think shame on you if you're not keeping an eye on how this Amazon thing plays out. It may not amount to too much, but it could be very, very disruptive. I think, you know, watch data coming out from Cox and CDK around their consumer surveys. I think that they package that up quite well. I think most importantly, you know, lean on your vendors. One of the most important questions you can ask your vendor isn't so much about how am I doing, but ask them, who are the best dealers in America and what are they doing? And what should I be learning from them? Which isn't a question that dealers often ask because, you know, your egos get caught up that we're the best, et cetera. But I think lean on the vendors to help share insights on what the best dealers are doing and how you can adopt some of those processes in your own store.
Ed, enhancing current digital marketing efforts. How can dealers reach more customers?
We can talk about that from the sales side. We can talk about it from the service side, but it's and I'll circle back to what I brought up earlier, and it's meeting them on their terms, and it's removing that friction that's with all the bait clicks and whatever else, to where if they schedule a remote service, or if they schedule to have a remote delivery of their vehicle or whatever it may be, that we have an Uber-like app that where it's all transparent to them. They know who's coming to them. They see where their vehicle's at. They see when it's going to be there. All those elements removes the friction and removes the question of what's going on with my vehicle, whether they're buying a new vehicle from us or whether we're servicing a vehicle, whatever it may be, or maybe we're just enhancing their vehicle by selling them accessories or whatever else, but have it to where they can track the visibility no matter where it's at. Even if they bring it to us, allow them to be able to track the visibility where it's at.
Stefan?
Yeah, I would agree with what Ed said. And I think when you talk about Amazon coming in, one of the things Amazon is really good at is taking the friction out of the process. I don't care what the process is, they're really good at taking it out of the process. And that's something that absolutely has to happen in the car business. There's way too much friction, there's way too much time consumed in getting a car. And I think that whole convenience concept and the concept of thinking from the standpoint of the customer. Ed talks about it all the time. Tully talks about it all the time. It's not about you. It's about them. And it's about understanding what they want. And when you talk about attracting more customers, my sentiment, quite honestly, is if you leverage the AI and the technology that's available, what you want to do is attract the right customers at the right time and provide a customized experience for them, which you can do now that you've got the technology to do it. You just have to leverage it, and you have to think in those terms. That's all.
Brian, how can dealerships enhance their digital marketing this year?
Well, I'll say two things. The first thing is the question that Steve Greenfield just mentioned was the question I asked 100% of my vendors every single time. I'm like, I don't want to hear about this. All I care about is who's the best and what are they doing, and walk me through their process. And then I call them, just like talk to Ed, and I want to come out there and see your store. I want to see how it works to see if it's real. And I get to do that full time. So I think that there's nothing more important than what he said to that, so that people believe that it's possible. The second thing ties into that, and it ties into what everybody else is saying. If Amazon does come into this business, which I think it will, they got the biggest audience, and it's just a matter of how they do it. And I've played this out with multiple people. So what would it look like? How are they going to interact? Is it going to be service? We were a huge wholesale parts operator with Amazon, and I know how they work from that side. They'll do the same thing with sales. They're going to implement hardcore SLA, service level agreements. If you don't do this by this date, then you don't get these leads. You don't get this order, and we'll give it to somebody else. And there's going to be somebody else raising their hand that will. And that's how lead gen is going to work with Amazon. And it's going to come right back to what everybody's talking about, which is the customer experience. So everybody might as well start working on it right now, because worst case scenario, if Amazon does come in, if you're already doing business the way that, Ed Bozard Ford is doing business, he's going to be like, okay, bring it. He's already servicing, I don't know how many Amazon trucks, and he's already got a relationship because he does those SLAs the way that they want it done. So I think that it's going to be a disparity from the want to be pretty good at it to the ones that are really good at it. And they're going to get their, like Tully, they're going to get their unfair share of the business that everybody else isn't going to do. And it's going to be lopsided, and it's going to hurt for anybody who hasn't done it. And what's going to happen, like we talked about, reactive, you're going to have to do it anyway. So why not do it now?
Tully, your final thoughts. Dealerships, digital marketing efforts, how can they make the most impact in 2024?
So I'm going to be on the fixed side and say, do it. Here's what happens when a service manager gets a call from a digital person. What is the other guy doing? 10% off? Okay, I'll do that too. And then that's it. Be interactive with the person. And please don't use a sales afterthought program. Use a fixed ops program and work your person. What happens what does sales do? We have a dedicated team of millions of people that help our sales people sell one car. I want to sell 1,000 hours a day. I want to make sure that we have technology and we have a vendor that cares about fixed and my customers. That's what you need to find. Don't be satisfied with a second-rate digital marketing tool.
Dave Foy, your final thoughts. How can dealerships enhance their current digital marketing efforts to reach more customers this year?
I'm going to say be attentive to their wants and needs. And by there, I mean the consumer. We've historically tried to dictate to the consumer what they want and need, and we have consistently missed with our nail salons in dealerships and cafes and all kinds of other stuff that sit empty because people don't want to actually wait there. Be attentive and understand what the consumer is asking for, what they want. If Amazon succeeds with this Hyundai thing, it won't be because the consumer didn't want it. Right? They're telling us what they want. We need to pay attention and focus our efforts onto what the consumer actually wants.
Well, on behalf of Ted Ings and the Fixed Ops Roundtable, I want to thank each of you for being part of this radical change panel today. Steve Greenfield, Ed Roberts, Stefan Wessner, Brian Kramer, Tully Williams, and Dave Foy. Thank you all for being here. And stay tuned. We have more segments coming up next right here on the Fixed Ops Roundtable.